Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the UFOcast as Captain Scarlet, talking about Lunarville 7. So we are halfway through the 32 episodes of Captain Scarlet with this one. I've been motoring through these over the last few days, so although you're, as ever, hearing these weekly, I think I've recorded the last 7 in about a week or so. So it feels like I'm picking up some steam. So, the moon enters the conflict with the Mysteron. It's an interesting idea for an episode. A lot of world building, I suppose, going on here, giving us more of an insight into the world of 2068. It's interesting, the Lunar Controller's message. Clearly, the Anderson production team had no confidence in in John F. Kennedy's idea of getting a man on the moon by the end of the decade, because the suggestion here is that we didn't land on the moon until the 70s. How wrong they were. Just a year after broadcast of this episode, the Americans would land men on the moon. So there's an interesting link there, I guess. It's funny now watching this, because when I first saw this, I had not seen UFO. But watching it now, it's impossible not to make those comparisons, seeing as so much of the UFO action happens on the moon with Moonbase, with the Moonmobiles, with Sid, and musically, I think there's the similarities there. But obviously, when this was produced, UFO was yet to come. You have to try and kind of remove those memories, I suppose, in thinking about it and reviewing it. Again, it's one of those episodes where there's no Mysteron threat specifically in the opening, and as we've seen from previous episodes, that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. It's okay to have episodes where Spectrum are investigating what's going on without the Mysteron specifically threatening to destroy something or blow something up. And as it turns out, they are entering Mysteron territory and taking the fight to them. I suppose it's quite a simple episode in that there's not a great deal that happens. As I say, it's more about the world building, and spoilers, this is the first episode of a trilogy of sorts. We do have a couple of episodes to get through first before the sequel. Again, watching it in light of that, you realise that it's the first part. And Colonel White alludes to that, I suppose, at the end of the episode by saying we've won the round, but the war goes on. It's nice to have Lieutenant Green out on a mission again, and for him to actually have something to do in terms of his observations of the Mysteron complex. It's more Captain Blue who feels like a third wheel in this instance, and he does very little. My concern is what happened to the pilot of the rocket, because he disappears when they arrive at the moon and is never seen again. So, poor chap. What happened to him? The comedy with Orson listening is a fun part of the episode. Captain Scarlet has something of a sense of humour, it seems. Reviewing the early episodes, it felt that Captain Scarlet was somewhat to the background and Captain Blue actually had a bigger role. But by this point in the series, we really see that he is the lead. He takes the lead, and he is the driver of everything that goes on. It's a bit odd that they decided to keep a mystery how Captain Scarlet had got around the Lunar Controller's lockdown, switch discs. Okay, yes, I was hoping it was something slightly more complicated than that. And the ending is a little silly. Things seem a lot more flammable in the future. I mean, it's nice as ever to see another Derek Meddings explosion, but shooting a computer and blowing it up, and therefore the whole base explodes? But hey, I mean, I'll let it off. I suppose the bigger question is, would you have those kind of weapons on the moon? Would it be sensible to have a projectile weapon that could puncture a dome? Anyway, that's by the by. I'm being overly critical. It's a fun episode. It creates a very different atmosphere for the show. Like I said, the music is very distinctive, very memorable. A nice piece of work from Barry Gray there. I mean, when does Barry Gray not turn in a nice piece of work? I think is the question. I love his music, and this piece gets featured on the CD that came out probably about 20 years. I don't know, it might be 20 years ago now. I forget when that batch of CDs came out. And like I say, this nicely sets the scene for future Moon stories. Should the production team choose to do one, as we know there is another one, the follow up, which my recollection is I enjoy more. But this is still a great introduction to moon life in the world of Captain Scarlet, and just nice to have some more variety, because as ever with the format that they have, it can get boring, it can get stale. We've seen that there are episodes that don't work, so well. And it's just nice to see that halfway through the series they're still finding fresh things to do with the format. This week's Spectrum agent is Dave Hollis.
What I like about the episode is the way the models are and the facial expressions in the actual characters. That they've totally advanced on from Thunderbirds, where they were just starting to get the expressions in the faces, maybe an eye blink and a couple of set features in the things. This time they're actually getting more character coming through into the puppet. So that side of the thing is probably more advanced and more enjoyable to look at. And the other side of the coin is the actual rocket launch. That was compared to like the Sun probe, where it says we're up to £20 million of thrust and it takes off, and there's only 3 thrusters going. They've advanced quite a bit in just a short period of time. I think the actual storyline, because it's my sort of childhood, so I think the first time there, and space adventure was really in everybody's heart and soul. We were watching TV, anything to do with space. So Captain Scarlet going into space and landing on the moon to actually a space colony, it was absolutely amazing. People nowadays, they see the takeoff of Elon Musk and SpaceX, and that's now becoming almost a weekly occurrence. The Sid was the first time he's been actually used as a computer. He then turns up in UFO. It's supposed to be Space Intruder Detector. And in this version, it was Speech Intelligence Decoder. Just sort of sticks in my mind of hell as well in 2001 Space Oddity. I think everything sort of spins off from the space age, probably started from Fireball. For me, it holds a lot of special memories of how we were hoping things were going to be. We haven't quite got there yet, but we're almost there. With all the bits and pieces going around in life at the moment, it is nice escapism as well. So going back into something which is not so real.
And if you'd like to contribute to a future episode of the podcast, visit ufocast.co.uk/captain to sign up. So moving on to episode order, interesting to note how the VHS order, of course, is completely nuts in that it has that compilation of Shadow of Fear, followed by the Moon trilogy, Lunarville 7, Crater 101, and, well, Dangerous Rendezvous is not on the moon, but is a completion of that storyline. So that is completely bonkers if that's your introduction to Captain Scarlet. The DVD box set also slightly weird in that they're in the right order. There's a much bigger gap between Lunarville 7 and Crater 101, which is fine. But then the DVD range puts Shadow of Fear between Crater 101 and Dangerous Rendezvous, which it feels an odd way of doing things, because Shadow of Fear feels like a separate story. The idea of Spectrum doing that alongside the Moon stuff at the same time it just feels a bit weird. It makes sense that Dangerous Rendezvous follows on immediately after Crater 101. So I'm generally enjoying this Blu-ray order. It makes much more sense because it's the order in which production happened pretty much. So it's weird to see other orders in evidence. Not much to say on any of the other things. There are no new Mistron powers as far as we can tell. Definitely no Mistron still at large, though I suppose we can say the Mistron complex is still at large. This is very much a win for Spectrum, though, in that they discover this Mistron nest on the moon. And we will obviously add the Lunar Controller and Orson to the Mistron puppet gallery for this week on the website. Head over to ufocast.co.uk to see how that is getting on. Next week, as I say, we have a pause on the Lunar story with a visit to the episode The Trap. This is, again, one of those ones that I had on VHS as a kid, so it's one that I'm very familiar with and very much looking forward to.